Hello, everybody. Welcome to the idtalks. The idtalks is a series of webinars that is presented to you by Salto Inclusion and Diversity Resource Center. I am Anna, the facilitator of idtalks, and together with my colleagues, Maria from Salto Inclusion and Diversity Resource Center, Maria from our social media team, and Olaja, who is taking amazing graphic notes in the background. We are very happy to welcome you to 55th idtalks and the last one of this season. This year, in autumn of 2025, idtalk is focusing on the topic of social justice. We are looking into the dynamic between structural change and individual integration. While focusing on individual needs is very necessary, a more significant focus, we believe, should be on developing inclusive, diversity-sensitive structures that eliminate barriers from the beginning. So instead of creating strategies and programs where we are which are corrective in their nature and start with the thought of eliminating existing barriers, we would like to see these programs evolve toward an approach where the programs are designed in a barrier-free way from the start. So in this season, we have had already 4 different very interesting talks on the topic of social justice, and you can check them out if you look at our website and the social media channels, and my colleagues will now share the links here. And today is the 5th and final talk of the season, and we are really excited about it. Today we are going to talk about social justice and education. What is the role of education, and especially non-formal education, in actively countering injustice and helping to build inclusive democracy for the benefit of all? What kind of tools and resources are needed? We will be discovering the examples of social justice education and peace education and see how they are contextualized and targeted at young people with fewer opportunities. And I'm really, really pleased to have a guest speaker with us from Mondo, Estonia, Maria Sakarias. She works in the field of sustainable development with a particular focus on education as a driver of social change. Herself, having spent a year in Nepal and India, she has deepened her knowledge and expertise in civil society and development cooperation, completing a master's degree in sustainable development in the Netherlands as well. Mondo, an NGO, is an NGO based in Estonia that works globally, and there Maria designs resources and leads trainings for educators and for young people. I think this is enough said from my side, but we will be very happy also if you complete this introduction on your own, Maria, and we are very happy and privileged to have you here today with us. I am happily passing you the floor.
Thank you very much, and hi to everybody. I will start my slides and would like to thank you, first of all, for joining this idtalk today. Yes, I am based in Estonia, in Tallinn, and work for NGO Mondo as a board member and global education program manager as well. But today I'm calling in from Budapest, and I'm here for a peace education training in youth work. So it's very relevant, actually. I do, yes, come from a background of international development, sustainable development in particular, but I also, yes, studied and worked in education and linguistics and second language learning there as well. And over the past decade or so, I worked with teachers, young people, with schools, with youth centers and international networks in Estonia, in Netherlands, and globally. And the guiding question in my work with educators and with young people has been, what kind of education, that is non-formal education in the context of this call, do we need for creating a more fair, peaceful, and sustainable world? Because education is never neutral. In our classrooms, in our youth centers, we constantly make decisions about what to prioritize, what kind of stories to share, what not to share, which topics to raise, what not to raise, and which values do we want to actively promote. And in our activities, in our day-to-day activities, we can either reinforce inequalities, maybe without even noticing it, or help to reduce them through our work. I just want to make a very quick note before we start that I have an immense amount of respect for everybody here and for the work that teachers and youth workers do. I also consider myself a youth worker, perhaps a youth work innovator in my current role, working with young people in Estonia regularly as well. And I just see and feel that the pressure that the society puts on youth workers is immense. And listening to the first talk by Maria Pisani saying that we kind of look at youth work as the remedy for all kinds of illnesses really spoke to me, that it's kind of unethical, unrealistic to make educators carry the weight of creating that more fair, peaceful, and sustainable world, and even less so to put that weight on young people. So today with you, I'm simply here to share my experiences and perspective, but still with that kind of understanding that even though there is a lot that we're already supposed to do, we still cannot afford to delegate a responsibility of social justice or peace education work to others. And that we need to look critically at the work that we are doing and see how we can improve in not only giving young people the key skills, the personal professional skills as the official definition of youth work foresees, but also actively look for ways that young people and in the process ourselves can become these kind of, if you want to use that word, agents of change for a better world. So yes, I will share some experiences today, some practical aspects as well. I'm a practitioner, not an academic at the end of the day. We'll discuss what social justice means. At the end of the day, this is the final lecture of this series, so kind of want to wrap it up and bring it all together, see what social justice education then means, what is peace education, how do we differentiate, how do we give this kind of perspective, nuanced understanding of peace and violence, and some directions for practical implementation of one or the other. So, inviting us to not begin with policy or theory too much, but with something a little bit simpler, which is a feeling. And this is oftentimes what we ask from young people as well. What does justice feel like for you? Not look like, well, not what you think it is, but what does it feel like? And oftentimes the answers that we get are related to emotions, sense of safety, of feeling calm, feeling being somehow at ease, being seen and heard and respected. Nobody really says that, it feels like a policy framework, whatever, that we can bring that word justice into our own experience very quickly when relating it to feelings. And just a little story here. I remember when I was 17, I did an exchange year in France, and not really knowing the language, being first time in a foreign country, more or less, I was sitting in the back of the classroom, formal education context now, in a history class, and the teacher was covering the Second World War, and then over the course of the lessons, what followed after. And I kind of understood that the way that history was being taught in Estonia, the stories that my parents told me were different from what was being shared in that classroom, what kind of stories my classmates had heard at the time. And then the teacher, I don't know if he thought of it or if he felt it, it gave me the opportunity to share, in fact, to give a presentation about where I come from and how history is taught in Estonia and what that particular event and the following era meant for me and my family, my grandparents, my parents, kind of asking me to share my perspective on it all. And yeah, it's kind of a technical topic, maybe it wasn't even so close to my identity, but yet I remember that feeling like, hey, this is kind of unfair. There's topics that I would like to raise here, but I don't know if I have the space for it. So that kind of invitation from that educator, from the teacher at the time of seeing me and trusting me made me feel at an equal level or appreciated somehow for the background or for the culture that I brought into that classroom. So reflecting on it for me, justice in the kind of feeling sense of things begins with the moment when we realize that our opinion matters, that our voice counts. And we can think about it respectively that injustice begins the moment that somebody learns that their voice doesn't count, is not considered equally important or equally valuable somehow. So when we talk about social justice in education, in non-formal education, what I will be referring to, what for me this whole concept is about eventually is this kind of emotional climate of learning, this kind of invisible sense of safety and sense of belonging and sense of self-worth that we are aiming to create. And we see it as this kind of a foundation that everything else rests upon, and that we can build the education work self upon as well. Now, what is social justice? You probably have your own definitions or your own sort of words and ideas that crop up in your mind as you see this question. I would just suggest a little bit of a definition here. It is a society where everyone is treated with fairness, with dignity, and with respect, where people feel that they have, or actually do have, equal rights and opportunities, access to resources, and where nobody is disadvantaged because of who they are or where they come from. Obviously, what I'm describing here is an ideal that we might not even achieve at any moment in time. So while we are in this situation, today, our work is to recognize the inequalities that exist and see where we can change ourselves as well as the kind of systems that keep these inequalities in place. I'm speaking in very abstract terms, but you, the audience here, and the ID talks before me as well have tackled it already in different ways. So let's delve deeper into this social justice education component. It is, in a way, simply an approach that brings that fairness and equity, inclusion, awareness of power, possibilities of taking action to the education space, asking these kind of uncomfortable questions, as you might ask every now and then. What is right? Whose knowledge is right? What counts as truth? Who is leading? Who is invited to lead? And who are the ones who are sort of being helped, right? In many countries, of course, in Estonia as well, we see that students from lower income or minority backgrounds are facing gaps in academic achievement. I mean, Estonia is really taking pride in its very high quality education for a good reason. We can be very proud of it indeed. And the PISA results are showing immense, actually number one, right? But when you look deeper, then the inequalities are increasing, inequalities in different ways. And I just wanted to point out that the goal of social justice education is also to understand that it's not because of individual failure of that particular young person that they are facing these kind of gaps in academic achievement, right? That sometimes it just reflects deeper issues of structural inequalities in our societies, in our education systems. So the goal of this social justice oriented education is to try to change these systems so that every learner has both access to quality education, but also this kind of agency, and they feel agency over their learning. So yeah, bringing in Paulo Freire, that we have heard about in the previous lectures as well, and that you are very familiar with, perhaps, that we would help young people read the world as well as the words, kind of understand the world and the society around us, to look at it critically with open eyes and hearts, and then to act upon the issues that we see. So we're kind of raising these kind of critical global citizens who participate, to raise questions, who can think critically, and therefore imagine fairer, more sustainable futures as well. Sharing another story and inviting you also to think back on when you sensed or felt that agency over your learning. When I was 15, before going to France then, I went to a school where indeed the quality of education was quite high, but yet somehow as that 15-year-old, I was sensing that there are important topics that I want to learn about, but the teachers are somehow not covering them. That I heard that there's climate change happening in the world. It was already quite a while ago. It was this relatively new idea, at least for us, where we lived, and it was not covered in our geography or biology classes. I was interested in the religions of the world. I wanted to understand psychology, but it wasn't really there. So we gathered with a group of young people, others like us, every Wednesday in a youth center, and chose documentaries to watch them together, reflected on them, discussed. We were brave and wrote to university lecturers and asked them to join us and to tell us what they know about one field or another. So there was this agency of learning, like sitting down with others and thinking what it is that we want to know about and who goes out there to see how we can learn about it. Now looking back, of course, I was also privileged to find that space, to find these other young people, to have the time, to have access to that kind of knowledge, or that knowledge creation. But that feeling of being in charge somehow was really powerful and very strong. And I think shaped me in my life later on as well. And just to reflect on how the formal education space didn't really provide that. And we had to find the non-formal education then, which did offer the agency. So yeah, for me then social justice education means experiencing that every young person can feel that they can show up as themselves, they can raise the topics that are important for them without having to hold back or hide parts of themselves or hide their identity. The youth club that we had at the time was actually called Be Yourself. Really naive, but somehow meaningful looking back. So Paulo Freire called education the practice of freedom. And I think this phrase has guided a lot of teachers and youth workers and activists until now as well. So freedom in education doesn't have to mean chaos. It means the freedom to think and to ask why and to connect knowledge with our experiences, with our lived experiences. And what we really, really value, and what I've heard in previous talks as well, is listening to young people and also meeting them somehow at an equal level, not one above the other, not like one filling the cup like the other empty cup, right? Equal level of respect towards each other. And I know that many of you have felt it or have seen young people becoming really invested and motivated and interested because the activity somehow connected with their daily lives. And that's the sense of freedom that we're talking about, the real curiosity. So when we say that education is the practice of freedom, we kind of mean that we shouldn't give young people only the skills to succeed in life, but the sense of liberation, the capacity to imagine alternatives for themselves and for the community, for the society that they live in, and also capacity to act on them. Rather theoretical again, but I hope that you'll be able to gather some glimpses from your experiences and kind of see how you might be able to create more and more of such circumstances for our young people, especially for those who might come from disadvantaged backgrounds. Moving on from social justice education to peace education as well. First of all, just emphasizing that somehow these terms are quite similar. We will explore how, yet there are some nuances that are different. Here at Mondo, we practice peace education as such, and social justice education is kind of feeding into it. I will explain why. So peace education is, first of all, rather personal and introspective. Social justice education as well, of course. We look inside, we try to figure out what are our personal biases, where are the stereotypes, where might I be discriminating without even realizing it. And peace education invites us to also reflect on my sense of emotional well-being and my own sense of peace within my self-respect and my, well, emotional literacy as well. So you'd have these kind of 4 layers of peace as we conceive of it: the peace with oneself, the relational peace with others, bringing in empathy and nonviolent communication, cooperation. Then we have peace with the community, participation and inclusion. And then finally, sense of peace with the environment actually as well, and sustainability feeding into it too. So oneself, the others, the community, and the environment. That's one kind of nuanced way of looking at this concept of peace. And the other way that we invite young people and youth workers to reflect on peace is through the lenses of negative and positive peace. So this is the work of Johan Galtung from the 60s, referring to negative peace as the absence of open violence, meaning no fighting around us, no bombs perhaps. But positive peace is something deeper, something more abstract, difficult to grasp, which then is the presence of justice and equality and human rights. And within this framework, you understand that positive peace cannot be achieved by force. And that's the principle. It grows through understanding and fairness, and this kind of cultural change that we want to bring about. So the purpose of peace education somehow is then to build this social fabric that prevents violence before it might even start. So we want to have more social justice in a way to prevent conflict. Social justice education then somehow aiming to contribute to a more equal world. So yeah, you see already how they are intertwined. I just want to say that both of them ultimately contribute to what we would consider an inclusive democracy, as we are depending on people who can argue passionately, perhaps, but without attacking each other, without becoming violent in their self-expression, and without dehumanizing one another as well. Again, looking at a little story, this is our office space in Tallinn, where we invite youth workers and teachers every now and then to reflect on these topics from a critical perspective. And one common way to facilitate a peace education workshop would be to start with the simple question of what peace means for them. Not really the feeling part, but let's just look at the concept, the meaning of peace. And usually people would write words like maybe absence of war, no war, or agreement, or safety. And then when bringing in that negative peace and positive peace layers and the different aspects of peace that we can experience, then we start to see it in a more kind of holistic or more nuanced way. And I remember the realization of one of the participants. In fact, I have realized it time and time again that peace is also self-kindness or self-compassion. That this person said, I realize I never speak to myself kindly if peace doesn't start from me, my heart, and myself. How can I even expect it to carry on or trickle over to anywhere else as well? So the message that I want to come across here is that peace education as such is not only about looking at conflicts and trying to address this direct violence or navigate in that space. It's also about these kind of daily relationships and really like subtle work. How do we talk? How do we listen? How do we include? How do we exclude others? Because when people feel that they are calm, when they have an inner sense of calm and social respect, they are far more capable of acting for peace as well. At least that's our understanding and our experience. And understanding violence then is yet another part of the side of the coin when it comes to peace education. Again, from an understanding that in order to build peace, we have to name violence in its different forms. And this is the triangle of violence that many of you might also be familiar with. The direct violence, physical, verbal harm, relatively easy to notice, which I refer to as well. But then the structural violence being the way that institutions would limit people's opportunities, and also the cultural violence then, the beliefs and the norms that somehow justify or normalize the other two, the structural violence and the direct violence. And structural violence, maybe it's like a set of activities that ignores cultures, or cultural violence be like, okay, so these young people don't care anyway. the students here. We don't even need to try. I will look at a few more concrete examples of stories in a minute, but just to bring out that violence is not necessarily just one event, right? It's made up of a series of events, perhaps, or words that have been used over a period of time, or perhaps it's just silence. It's kind of hard to grasp, but when we start seeing these issues, it's only then that we can start to solve them as well. So looking at structural violence in education, or perhaps in non-formal education, again, just a little thought every now and then, where have you spotted it? In youth work, it might appear in how programs are organized or funded or what they are designed for. So if there's, for example, two young people who want to join an exchange, and I'm explaining it to you, not to tell you what structural violence necessarily is, but giving examples so that we can discuss this with our colleagues and with our young people as well, right? So these are the kind of case studies that exemplify what I mean. So for instance, we have two people who want to join youth exchange. One of them has a passport, has parental support, speaks English really well. The other doesn't have the travel documents, maybe has to work part-time and has never been abroad. So on paper, we have an opportunity with equal access because the call for applications is open to everybody. But in practice, one might face invisible barriers that make participation harder. So it's kind of, the structural violence is hidden behind these phrases that everybody can apply while ignoring unequal starting points. Also, these kind of youth centers we have in Estonia with rural areas, who might not be open every day or close earlier, lack of funding. When we have activities in capital cities, Mondo is also based in the capital city. We try to reach out. We really, really try, because we see that that's critical. And you would also know very well what I mean when decision makers are inviting youth representatives to be part of discussions who already come from privileged backgrounds. So yes, so translation, travel support, mentoring, flexible timing. I think we think that all of this goes without saying, yet time and time again, seeing this tendency to think that, oh, if we treat everyone the same, then we are acting equally, or we are practicing equality, without remembering the equity part. We need to give everybody what they need in order to participate. So you can see how now social justice education and peace education are somehow coming together, that we are working within the peace education framework to reduce or to prevent violence, but simultaneously we are contributing to social justice as well. Or cultural violence, for instance, these kind of hidden jokes or habits, the way that we talk about good and bad youth, this culture of, what's this expression that has been circulating in our society right now, that we have a culture of being offended, that we shouldn't get offended so quickly. I find that extremely dangerous. Sentences that don't seem to be so problematic at first glance, like, he's just not motivated. No point in trying. You can leave him alone in the classroom. He's never going to learn anyway. How many times have I heard teachers sharing that they find the sentences by their colleagues like that very problematic? I think sometimes we don't even notice when we're putting people in boxes and therefore excluding them. Or girls are better at creative tasks, boys are better at leadership. It can also be the silence when we choose not to address a topic because it's uncomfortable to discuss in a youth camp or training. Mental health, privileges, and racism. And honestly, it is sometimes super tough. And I'm not oftentimes able to articulate what I would like to at the given time as well. Need to be kind to ourselves and understand how can we build the capacity in ourselves to do so. this kind of cultural violence is disguised in normality, like this is just how things are done, this is how projects work. And the critical work and youth work is inviting us to notice these patterns and to question them, to make these kind of hidden assumptions visible. And again, trying to create that sense of imagination for a better, more fair, more equal, and more sustainable future. This sense that the way things are right now doesn't mean that they have to be like this as well, that we have the capacity and the responsibility for change. All of this, again, sounds like a beautiful bunch of words. If we manage to put into practice, that's the hard part, really. Now, moving a little bit from the theory to pedagogy, these are some of the works that influence the type of peace education or global citizenship education that we do. You recognize them maybe, and would add many others, I'm sure, just to keep these things simple here. Some principles that we don't practice peace education with providing answers or right answers, that we're inviting young people for debating or dialogue all the time, that we try to bring the local issues or the community issues into the learning. Even if we talk about global topics, we always connect it with very, very local challenges to bring that sense of meaning for the young people. We encourage as much as possible co-creation of projects or activities, also rules, and then reflecting on how our own biases shape meaning. Again, for the purpose of agency, the belief that we can shape the world around us. And again, that's what every democratic society needs as well. I will go a little bit into practical tools now. I have 4 to share with you. And I added the links, which you can look up later as well, just describing possible work that you might be doing for social justice education or peace education. Maybe you've heard before, the Power Flower is a tool that we like to use with young people oftentimes. So here, see a flower, you don't see it, tiny text in there, but the petals represent different parts of our identities. We can either fill them up together, everybody can fill them themselves. That might be gender, ethnicity, language, sexuality, age, ability, mapping that out in the first place. And then in the outer petals, mapping the identities that might hold power in our contexts, that might come with privileges, and the inner petals for those that experience exclusion. Yeah, so when you start coloring these flowers, yeah, you will quickly see that some flowers will be kind of larger, being able to expand more into the larger parts of the petals, and others will be smaller. So it's just a tool to help understand what privilege means. And it's not only about wealth and fame, it's also about these elements that are kind of quiet or hidden, or the doors that open for you without an effort. And sometimes we can experience multiple things at once. We can experience privilege and also oppression, depending on the context, or depending on the part of our identity. Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to the group discussions to hear more about your practices with addressing the question of privileges as well. Another exercise that we like to do a lot is this building a village exercise in a workshop. We always prioritize these kind of experiential methods. Today I'm here to share my thoughts in a lecture format, but it is the experience that really might shape us and change us. I'm very aware of that. So an activity of building a village would mean that groups of young people are given different colors of modeling clay, and they have a set of rules which are related to their culture. So as you can see on the photo here, all of the houses need to have a cone shape, or you must never build roads between houses in your village, or you must have a sign of flower on each and every building, for instance. That's our culture. And then for a while, the group is building that particular village according to the rules. They must not speak, by the way. And in that set of rules, there's quite a lot of different elements, really. So they have to kind of start practicing that culture. But then something happens, one person has to move to another space and take their house with them, now arriving in a context where they feel that they are completely different, or that their norms and culture, something that they were so much used to, is either very different or not even allowed in the new place where they are. So what do you do then? Do you mold yourself into a cone? Do you add that flower element, although it was a taboo in your previous culture? And just to give that experience of, well, not only migration, but living in a condition of perhaps structural violence might mean. Yeah, and all of this is going on without talking. So adding the component of not being able to understand each other oftentimes as well. It's a meaningful activity, especially for youth workers and of course for young people as well, to reflect on what inclusion versus exclusion might really feel like. One more tool to share here. This is quite a simple activity. This is our trainer who came up with these little icons that you would put on, for instance, a person's head, and they would have to form groups without knowing their own label, only seeing the others. And as you can see, again, we have one label that is different. And it's interesting to observe how the groups react. You start looking for somebody who's like you. You feel so comfortable when you have identified that other person with that little orange shape or circle shape or whatever. And sometimes the group dynamic works in a way that the person who was clearly different will be excluded, and sometimes they're just left excluded. It depends. And the reflection component is what is interesting again, and seeing for that person what discrimination might feel like, and the other participants of how they feel when they see somebody being excluded. Do they react, or do they choose to ignore because that's a little bit more comfortable at the time? And finally, also want to convey that peace education and social justice education does not have to be taking place in the format of a workshop only, right? The intervention is important and it's a great tool. The three that I described here function very well. The question is also, how do we bring these kind of activities to the environment itself, as in how do we practice peace education, social justice education continuously without making it just as a part of an activity. So here the concepts of these safer spaces and brave spaces come in as well. Might have heard about these, and just bringing it out here as well as it's so relevant. Once for all, just to start with, we do use the term safer spaces in peace education, as we understand that complete safety might not exist. But yeah, trying to create them more in a more safer way. And that would then mean an environment when the young person feels that they can be who they are and they are willing to take responsibility, take action, and will be met without criticism, but rather respect and inclusion. And brave spaces where I kind of understand that, okay, change happens in moments when we are not quite comfortable. So we kind of agree to accept this discomfort and lean into it. So some elements that would enable this physical environment and the emotional environment around us to be safer and brave is intention, right? Having group agreements, demonstrating humility and openness and authenticity ourselves as educators, accepting that silence sometimes when it happens, acknowledging our own mistakes. So we can, with our behavior and with the space, somehow model the type of emotional safety and peace that we want to have in our youth centers. So that this kind of diversity sometimes would not be a source of tension, but we can turn it into learning. As you see, I've been linking different tools here, and we have a whole online course in English language and other languages on peace education in particular, where youth workers are guided to reflect on how, if and how their spaces today would reflect this sense of safety and bravery, and how they might increase that. So yeah, just to start drawing it all together, the peace education and social justice education are completely intertwined, and they share this goal of somehow modeling inclusive democracy in our educational spaces. Because our youth centers, our organizations, schools, our projects, they're always these kind of microcosms of democracy. It's a representation of what we want to see outside in the walls of youth centers. So just want to emphasize or reflect on our experience that when we practice democracy in youth work setting, it has perhaps even more of a significant impact than doing that one-off workshop, right? So if decision-making is shared, we learn collaboration. If youth workers decide, then young people are learning to follow. Or if disagreement is explored, appreciated, brought to light, we can be grateful for the disagreement, then we learn how to have a good dialogue. But if we somehow avoid disagreement, avoid conflict, then we learn silence as well as, right? So just to reflect on what it is that we want to see in our societies and how we can model that in our behavior, in the values that we want to give forward with our activities. And ultimately, peace education, social justice education is all about our objectives, what it is that we want to achieve, what kind of ultimate purpose do I have with my day-to-day activities. And I see very strongly that the two of them need to be combined. If we only have social justice education and leave the peace component out from there, we might resort to aggression, perhaps. And the other way around, if we look at peace education and don't consider that social justice component, or looking at that structural cultural violence that I was talking about, then we might become self-assured, not aware of our privileges and inequalities around us as well. So they really go hand in hand. And the question always remains, where can I feel that agency and freedom? And when we carry out a peace education workshop or global education, however you name it, we need to bring in a sense of action as well. When we discuss inequalities, there can be a quick sense of paralysis or kind of difficulty with sitting with the current circumstances or with our emotions. Sitting with the difficulty is also fine. What helps at the end of the day is to find that one place where you can somehow take action, even if it's very small. So I invite you to think of something that you have noticed around you as well. There were questions on the previous slides too. Where have you felt injustice? Where have you seen injustice around you? And is there a concrete action you might take? And we didn't want to say now or tomorrow, but this week to perhaps address it. Because ultimately, again, these are the kind of seemingly small or insignificant actions that do matter, because ultimately that's how culture is being shaped and shifted. Now, here are a few resources that might be interesting for you to explore later on as well. I will add the links, and wanted to refer to two projects that we are currently designing and implementing for professional development resources for youth workers in peace education, as well as bringing that theory of peace education to concrete actions as well. So if you feel that this kind of work is resonating with you, I would love to find ways to collaborate and to spread the tools that we have and perhaps learn from each other, because there's a lot of resources out there. I just wanted to end with this little thought or quote by actually Pope Paul VI that captures what we have been talking about here, that if we want peace, then we need to work for justice. That justice and peace are not somehow separate projects, and justice gives peace the kind of backbone in a way, and peace gives justice its heart. And education, both formal and non-formal, is the space where we can learn and experience what these words feel like. And every lesson, every activity, every conversation is a chance to build the kind of world, society, future that we want to live in. One that is more fair, more equal, and more sustainable. So my question remains, what will you practice tomorrow? What will I practice tomorrow? Because taking action is extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. And I would like to ask Maria if you could react to that one question from Görkem that we have in the chat. How can we teach people, let's paraphrase and say young people, to make their voice matter, not just expect others to listen? What do you do? How do you encourage? I imagine not everybody is as initiative taking as you in your teenage years when you started this debate club or this discussion club in your youth center. So how do you do it? How do you support young people to do it?
I think the answer is that start from very small opportunities and give that kind of positive experience from just trying. I sometimes think that, yeah, we shouldn't imagine participation as something overly complicated or something that requires a lot of effort. An example would be young people being involved to give their ideas when it comes to designing a project, and they somehow vocalize it and they express it and they get feedback that they were that their voice was heard. So I think it's not possible to teach it in any other way than to allow for those experiences where you can express it and it is heard and it is taken into account, and that kind of builds this self-confidence or courage that I would dare to do it in other times as well. To make their voice matter, not just to expect others to listen. I just feel that this question should be worded in how the youth workers can allow young people to make their voice matter, because that's the only way that they can then experience that and then learn from it as well. That would be my answer. I see that Sophie has her hand up.
Thank you. I was going to say that we have one more hand, Sophie.
Hey, I'm in this case, I wanted to share that I do a project with young people, and I want, with this project I want to encourage them to share the experience that they live in Luxembourg, like newcomers, and find a way with them through the no formal education activities to integrate and to include them in the society with the local people. So yeah, I don't know if it's at the point, but I wanted to share.
That is exactly the point. Yes, I think you're doing
Yeah.
very courageous work.
And thank you for taking the
Thank
floor
you.
and bringing examples. And I think from others also it will be really interesting to hear. I was also thinking, Maria, how often we speak about a notion without experiencing that notion while we speak about it. For example, speak about peace without experiencing or exercising peace, or speak about democracy without exercising democracy, speak about fairness and justice without being fair and just. And I think one maybe what I hear from your talk is that as a youth center, we don't have to do something about justice per se. We can actually we can experience justice in everything that we do, and this is also in its way in education. And maybe if there are no other questions right now, I can have one. Your program that you have for youth workers or for educators, if you were to tell what is the kind of core knowledge, skill, and attitude that you develop, like one per each, what would that be? I heard also in your presentation that, and also in your biography, that is not only about the knowledge and skills, but also the values and reshaping the values. So if you could maybe give us a little glimpse of, as a youth worker, when they end up in your programs, what do you work on primarily?
Yes, on the knowledge component, we cover different topics. In this context, it would be diversity and identity, reflecting on what that is and what the different types of identity that young people experience and themselves experience. From the skill component, there is perhaps the most focus at the end of the day on conflict solution and communication skills, cooperation skills there as well. In the context of peace education, looking at values, these would be respect and openness primarily. And well, empathy, we can discuss whether that is a value or if it's a skill. If empathy is a kind of a muscle that we can work on as well, that we can continuously strengthen. And in the work that we do, we add to the knowledge and the skills and the values. We actually talk about that action component as well. In peace education and global education, it's always about the head and the heart and then the hands. What are the activities that we might then eventually do as well? It's not only think or what we feel in our hearts, but what ends up being the action that we take. And kind of reflecting on the comment that you made earlier, that the work for justice is something that is continuous and that we can kind of carry out through in our day-to-day youth work. I think the most important part here is to realize those moments that justice was not there or that we did not feel peace, or the interactions amongst ourselves were not peaceful. That's where we can kind of learn from. That's where we can understand what I can do differently next time. And with our youth workers, this is the core of the work. We reflect on case studies. We look back and we investigate and we discuss, is there something that next time I can do differently? I can act in a different way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I see there is another hand from Sophie, and we also have a question in Turkish language. So while I'm trying to find a good translation to translate that question, maybe we give Sophie one more chance to ask her question or share a reflection.
I have a question because I worked in pedagogy at Montessori, where it's supposed to be very inclusive and very grateful with the child. But I I was I it proves me that it's not the case in this place where I'm working, because for example, the child didn't want to play with the other children, so the other educators are saying me, you have to force the child to play. So for me, that's not justice. because if the pedagogy is like with the rhythm of the child, so I think it's not justified to say me that I have to force the child to go to play with the others. And the values are not there, because if they are not justice, there is no values, because the values are part of the justice. For me, I don't know, it's my
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's very important that you were able to articulate it like this, that you notice something
yeah
and you can frame it. You understand what you were feeling and you feel it's not quite right. I wonder
yeah
if there was an opportunity to discuss this with your colleagues.
yeah because I said that I cannot force anyone to do something, because it's against the values of the person. So we have to respect the values. So, and also the personality of the person. If the person is more introvert, we cannot ask to him to socialize if he's not ready to do it. And I think that's also a justice, part of the justice.
Absolutely. That is it. That's it. You've nailed it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. There is an example here in the chat, but maybe I can paraphrase it rather to maybe a little bit more general question, right? So the perception of democracy and justice are different in different contexts in different countries, and depending also on who is in power, what is the general situation with rights in that country. How important do you consider that this move on justice and peace of these organizations is visible on social media generally? So shall we also be loud about what we are doing in this field, so that also encouraging the others? Or what's your take on it, let's say?
I think everybody has to find the answer for themselves, asking the kind of questions about, yeah, the brave space of what is uncomfortable for me, yet important to do. So talking about my work on social media, how can I do it if I feel that I need to do it, yet it's difficult, but at the same time, understanding the context, of course, and not putting yourself in danger or not using vocabulary that might be weaponized at some point. We have these discussions in a peace education project together with a team in Georgia. And perhaps you need to find different words to describe the work that you do. The content is the same, the goals are the same, yet the values that you emphasize, the skills that you talk about might be different. So I think talking about this work is important, and showing it to others is critical so that we can encourage each other as well. Yet exactly how to do it is then the question. Thank you.
In the end of the day, doing no harm also to those that are doing peace education, I think, is a very important factor. Because to be able to continue doing the work, we need to also think about brave spaces, not only for others, or safer spaces, not only for others, but also for ourselves as practitioners. I think and we can never take this for granted in different contexts. Yeah,
that should be a first priority for sure. It's always about finding that good balance, right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I'm now looking at Olaja in the background. Are we good to go? So while we are doing these presentations and discussions, and there is somebody quietly working in the background, and I would like to give now Olaja the floor to see what she has captured so far, seeing that we have kind of covered the questions we had in the chat or in the room. So Olaja, you have your 2 minutes of sharing some of your impressions and the graphic notes.
Nice, thank you very much. I will share my screen as usual. So I hope you can see the the visual notes coming from this talk from Maria. And I mean, my takeouts in this case, from a very one-sided perspective of listening to all these stories and to all this interconnectedness in general. I really like the combination of the two concepts, which seem quite complex, with one being social justice, the other one being peace education. And I really enjoy how we can bring it really to our small bubble, to our everyday actions, to our own feelings, starting with ourselves. So everything in this case starts within ourselves. So justice, peace, better futures. And I appreciate that combination of terms and the invitation to also look around, look within, and take small actions. So, which I think that most of us here can do at a bigger or smaller scope. So thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you, Elijah. You never cease surprising us and impressing us with this. I would like to pass you the floor back, Maria, to maybe make some final remarks. And then since this is the last talk of the season, then in the end, Maria from Salto Inclusion and Diversity will close today's day. Please, I'm very happy to pass you back the floor for some concluding remarks.
All I can say is that I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share my thoughts, my experiences, and happy to hear some of yours as well. Just sending you a note of encouragement to keep doing the good work that you're doing and to come to join these discussion floors where we can learn from each other and reflect rather complex topics together as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Maria, I just realized also that we started with Maria as a speaker on our first talk of the season. We were concluding with Maria on the last talk and our colleague from Salto Inclusion Diversity. I am passing you the floor, Maria, to say a few words to close the season and maybe to make some announcements.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Maria, for closing this season with sending a really important message. I would also like to underline the message about the small actions that we can do daily that Elijah also highlighted. And we started using this inner power to change structures, though it might be very frustrating and a long process. But I hope that this season helped us a bit to see what is our role a bit in this world as a youth workers, as youth professionals, and how together with young people we can do something about the future of the world and our own future. I'm really happy with all 5 talks we had. I would like to thank all the guest speakers who shared their expertise with us, who also provoked us a bit and hopefully inspired us all for future actions. And a big thank you to my team, obviously, for doing 55 talks. And it doesn't stop here. We continue in 26. We will be back in February looking into intergenerational solidarity, what that means, what are the things that can bring people of different ages and different generations closer together, just to build bridges and to see how that can be done also in the youth work. So I'm really looking forward to next season and untapping new topics. So thank you all. Anna, back to you. Final words.
Final. We have closings of the closings today.
Yes.
But that's what happens on the last talk of the season. Thank you very much, Maria, for really bringing together or summarizing the season and being such an inspiring practitioner that is speaking from their own experience. I think that was very useful. And yes, also very happy to be back in the next season. Thank you very much for joining us and for following us online. And take care and maybe I will be the first person saying have nice Christmas holidays New Year holidays, and whatever you celebrate in the middle of winter. Bye bye.